Sarah Martinez never imagined that her childhood spent climbing trees and wrestling with her 4 older brothers would prepare her for what lay ahead. Growing up in a small Texas town where Friday night football ruled and women were expected to marry young, she was the anomaly. While other girls her age dreamed of prom dresses, Sarah dreamed of something bigger. The first warning came when she was 17. Her high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Henderson, pulled her aside after a particularly heated debate in government class about military intervention overseas. "Sarah, you need to tone it down," Mrs. Henderson said, adjusting her glasses nervously. "Young ladies don't need to be so aggressive about these topics." Sarah stared at the woman who had guided hundreds of students toward community college or local jobs. "Aggressive? I was just stating facts about strategic operations." "Exactly my point." Mrs. Henderson's voice carried the weight of small-town wisdom. "You're going to scare people. Men don't like women who know more than they do about such things." That night, Sarah sat on her bedroom floor, surrounded by military history books she'd borrowed from the library. Her mother knocked softly before entering, carrying a cup of hot chocolate. "Heard you had a rough day," Maria Martinez said, settling beside her daughter on the carpet. Sarah's mother had immigrated from Mexico at 19, worked 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school, and raised 5 children while her husband deployed overseas as an army mechanic. If anyone understood the weight of being underestimated, it was Maria. "Mom, why does everyone act like wanting something different makes me wrong?" Maria studied her daughter's face, seeing the determination that reminded her of her own younger self. "Mija, the world has a way of trying to make us smaller. But, sometimes, being dangerous is the only way to stay safe." The conversation would replay in Sarah's mind years later, when she stood in the recruitment office at 18, staring at the Navy SEAL poster on the wall. The recruiter, Petty Officer Williams, followed her gaze and chuckled. "You thinking about the teams?" he asked, using the informal term for SEAL units. "Maybe," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Williams leaned back in his chair, studying her with the kind of look that said he'd seen this before. "Look, I'll be straight with you. Women can't be SEALs. It's not allowed. Has nothing to do with capability, everything to do with policy." "Policies change," Sarah said. "Not this one, sweetheart. This one's written in stone." That was the second warning, though Williams didn't know it. Sarah signed her Navy contract that day, choosing intelligence specialist as her rating. If she couldn't be a SEAL yet, she'd learn everything she could about their world from the inside. Boot camp at Great Lakes Naval Training Center was Sarah's first real taste of military life. The 8 weeks blurred together in a haze of early mornings, physical training, and classroom instruction. She excelled at everything thrown at her, finishing third in her company of 80 recruits. But it was during combat training that she truly distinguished herself. The exercise was simple: navigate through a mock village, identify threats, and neutralize targets using paintball weapons. Most recruits approached it like a video game, running and gunning with enthusiasm but little strategy. Sarah approached it like chess. She studied the layout for 10 minutes before moving, identifying sightlines and potential ambush points. While her classmates charged ahead, she moved methodically, using shadows and building corners to mask her approach. When the smoke cleared, she had eliminated 12 opposing force members without taking a single hit. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran with 3 combat deployments, pulled her aside afterward. "Martinez, where'd you learn to move like that?" "Books, Chief." "Lots of books." Rodriguez shook his head, grinning. "Books don't teach instinct. You've got something special. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." After boot camp, Sarah reported to Naval Technical Training Center Corey Station for Intelligence Specialist School. The coursework covered everything from signals intelligence to imagery analysis, but Sarah found herself drawn to the tactical intelligence classes. Learning how intelligence supported special operations missions felt like getting glimpses into a world she desperately wanted to join. Her instructor, Lieutenant Commander Janet Walsh, was one of the few senior female officers Sarah had encountered. After class one day, Walsh asked Sarah to stay behind. "I've been watching your performance," Walsh began, shuffling through Sarah's test papers. Top of the class in tactical analysis, exceptional scores on threat assessment scenarios. What are your long-term goals? Sarah hesitated. She'd learned to keep her SEAL aspirations quiet after facing eye rolls and patronizing smiles from male classmates. But something about Walsh's direct manner invited honesty. I want to support special operations, ma'am. Maybe even try for the team someday, if policies change. Walsh was quiet for a long moment. Policies do change, Martinez. But they change slowly, and they change because people push boundaries. You ready to push some boundaries? Yes, ma'am. Good. Because I'm recommending you for the Tactical Exploitation of National Capabilities program after you graduate. It's a joint assignment with SOCOM. You'll be working directly with special operations teams, including SEALs. Sarah's heart pounded. SOCOM was Special Operations Command, the joint headquarters that oversaw all elite military units. It was as close to the SEAL world as she could get without actually being one. The TENIC program placed Sarah at MacDill Air Force Base in Florida, home to both SOCOM headquarters and CENTCOM. Her days were spent analyzing intelligence from ongoing operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, creating detailed briefings for special operations commanders. But her real education happened after hours. The base gym stayed open 24 hours, catering to the odd schedules of special operations personnel. Sarah made it her second home, arriving at 0500 for PT and returning after her intelligence shifts ended at 1900. She studied the way SEALs trained, noting their focus on functional fitness over bodybuilding aesthetics. Master Chief Petty Officer Tom Reynolds was a 25-year SEAL veteran assigned to SOCOM as an operations planner. He noticed Sarah's dedication during their overlapping gym sessions and eventually approached her. You're Martinez from the intelligence section, right? Yes, Master Chief. Reynolds was built like a fire hydrant, broad and solid, with arms that looked like they could bend steel. His reputation preceded him, 3 silver stars, 2 bronze stars with valor, and more classified operations than most people had hot meals. When he spoke, people listened. Heard you've been putting together some outstanding intel packages for the teams. Thank you, Master Chief. Question is, why are you here at 0500 doing calisthenics that would make most SEALs cry? Sarah met his gaze directly. Because I want to be ready, Master Chief. Ready for what? For when the policy changes. Reynolds studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Policies change, Martinez. But standards don't. Standards never change. That conversation marked the beginning of Sarah's unofficial mentorship under Reynolds. He never explicitly offered to train her, but he began showing up at the gym during her sessions, offering subtle corrections to her form and suggesting modifications to her workout routine. Don't train like you're trying to look good, he told her one morning as she struggled through a set of weighted pull-ups. Train like your life depends on it. Because someday, it might. Meanwhile, Sarah's intelligence work was earning recognition throughout SOCOM. Her analysis of insurgent communication patterns in Anbar province led to the successful targeting of 3 high-value individuals in a single week. Her understanding of enemy tactics allowed SEAL teams to anticipate ambushes and adjust their approaches accordingly. Colonel James Mitchell, SOCOM's deputy commander for operations, personally commended her work during a staff meeting. Martinez's intelligence preparation of the battlefield has saved American lives, he announced to the assembled officers. This is exactly the kind of tactical intelligence support our special operations forces need. After the meeting, Mitchell approached Sarah privately. Martinez, I'm putting you in for early promotion to Petty Officer 2nd Class. Your work has been exceptional. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. I'm also recommending you for advanced tactical intelligence training at Fort Bragg. You'll be embedded with Delta Force for 6 months, learning their intelligence requirements firsthand. Sarah's pulse quickened. Delta Force was the Army's premier special operations unit, equivalent to the Navy SEALs in terms of selectivity and mission scope. Working with them would provide invaluable insight into special operations culture and requirements. The Delta Force assignment proved transformative. Based at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Sarah worked alongside some of the most experienced special operations intelligence professionals in the military. But, more importantly, she observed how elite operators thought, planned, and executed missions. Major Susan Crawford, Delta's senior intelligence officer, became another crucial mentor. Crawford had been one of the first women to serve in direct support of special operations, breaking barriers and establishing precedents that others would follow. The key to supporting these guys, Crawford explained during Sarah's first week, is understanding that they're not just soldiers. They're problem solvers. They look at impossible situations and figure out how to make them possible. Sarah threw herself into the work, often staying late to refine targeting packages or develop contingency intelligence for upcoming operations. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed by Delta's operators, who initially viewed her with the skepticism they reserved for all outsiders. Sergeant Major David Bull Peterson was a 23-year Delta veteran who had seen more combat than most people could imagine. He initially dismissed Sarah as another headquarters type who would rotate out after collecting her combat zone experience for her service record. That perception changed during a particularly complex mission planning session. The target was a high-value individual hiding in a densely populated urban area in Iraq. Previous attempts to capture him had failed because he seemed to anticipate raids and escape before teams arrived. Sarah had spent weeks analyzing the target's communication patterns, movement habits, and associate networks. During the briefing, she presented a theory that went against conventional wisdom. "I don't think he's getting tipped off by human intelligence," she told the assembled operators. "I think he's reading our pattern. We always hit targets in the early morning hours, between 0200 and 0400. He's learned to expect that window and adjust accordingly." The room fell silent. Delta operators prided themselves on unpredictability, and suggesting they had become predictable was tantamount to questioning their professional competence. Peterson leaned forward, his expression skeptical. "You think we should hit him during daylight? In a crowded urban area?" "No, Sergeant Major. I think we should hit him at sunset, when families are gathering for evening meals. It's when he feels safest, when he lets his guard down to eat with his own family." The mission, executed at 1830 hours local time, was a complete success. The high-value target was captured without resistance, along with several associates and a cache of intelligence materials. The success earned Sarah respect throughout the Delta community and established her reputation as an intelligence professional who understood operational requirements. But it was during the mission debrief that Peterson delivered the third warning, though he didn't realize it at the time. "Martinez," he said, pulling her aside after the formal debrief concluded. "You've got the instincts. You think like an operator. But you need to understand something." "What's that, Sergeant Major?" "This world, our world, it's not built for people like you. It's not about capability. It's about culture. And culture changes slowly." "I understand, Sergeant Major." Peterson studied her face, seeing something familiar in her expression. "Do you?" "Because I've seen that look before. I've seen it on every young soldier who thinks they're going to change the system from the inside. Some of them make it. Most of them don't." That night, Sarah sat in her quarters at Fort Bragg, reflecting on Peterson's words. She had been in the military for 3 years, had earned the respect of special operations professionals, and had proven her value in high-stakes situations. But she was still an outsider looking in, still a woman in a world designed by and for men. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Master Chief Reynolds back at MacDill. "Heard about your success with Delta. Keep pushing boundaries. The policy change is coming sooner than you think." Sarah stared at the message, wondering what Reynolds knew that she didn't. Policy changes in the military moved at glacial pace, requiring congressional approval and extensive studies. The idea that women might be allowed in combat roles, much less SEAL teams, seemed like a distant dream. But dreams, Sarah had learned, were just plans waiting for the right moment. And she intended to be ready when that moment arrived. Her Delta assignment ended 6 months later with a commendation from the unit commander and a personal recommendation for advanced training. Sarah returned to MacDill with 3 years of special operations experience and a growing reputation as one of the military's premier tactical intelligence specialists. Master Chief Reynolds met her at the airport, his usually serious expression betraying a hint of excitement. "Welcome back, Petty Officer Martinez. Hope you're ready for some news." "What kind of news, Master Chief?" "The kind that changes everything. Secretary of Defense just announced the formation of a study group to examine women in combat roles, including special operations." Sarah felt her world shift. The policy change Peterson and Reynolds had hinted at wasn't theoretical anymore. It was real, it was coming, and she needed to be ready. "Master Chief, what do I need to do?" Reynolds grinned, the expression transforming his weathered face. "You need to get dangerous, Martinez. Because when that door opens, you're going to kick it down." The fourth warning came from an unexpected source 3 months later. Sarah was attending a SOCOM social event, one of the informal gatherings that allowed different units to network and share experiences. She was discussing intelligence requirements with a group of Air Force Special Operations Command personnel when she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Captain Lisa Morrison, a Navy helicopter pilot attached to Special Warfare Command. Morrison had a reputation as one of the finest pilots in naval special operations, regularly flying SEALs into and out of hostile territory. "Martinez, right? The intel specialist everyone's talking about?" "Yes, ma'am." Morrison gestured toward a quieter corner of the room. "Mind if we talk?" They found a spot away from the crowd, and Morrison's expression grew serious. "I heard you're interested in the teams." Sarah hesitated, unsure how to respond. Her aspirations weren't exactly secret, but she had learned to be careful about discussing them openly. "I'm interested in serving wherever I can make the biggest difference, ma'am." Morrison smiled grimly. Diplomatic answer. "Look, I'm going to be straight with you. I've been flying SEALs for 8 years. I've seen what they do, how they operate, what it costs them. It's not just about physical capability or mental toughness. What is it about? It's about being willing to become something most people can't understand. These guys, the good ones, they've given up pieces of themselves to do what they do. They become weapons, and weapons don't have normal lives." Morrison paused, studying Sarah's face. "The question you need to ask yourself isn't whether you can do the job. It's whether you can live with what the job does to you." That conversation haunted Sarah for weeks. She had focused so intently on proving her physical and mental capabilities that she hadn't fully considered the psychological cost of special operations. She began paying closer attention to the SEALs she worked with, observing not just their professional competence but their personal struggles. Many were divorced, estranged from families who couldn't understand the demands of their profession. Others dealt with injuries that would plague them for life, accumulated through years of pushing their bodies beyond normal limits. Some carried psychological scars from operations that couldn't be discussed with anyone who hadn't shared similar experiences. But Sarah also saw something else, a sense of purpose that seemed to sustain them through the hardships. They had found their calling, had become part of something larger than themselves, had dedicated their lives to protecting others who couldn't protect themselves. The fifth and final warning came from within herself, during a pre-dawn run along Tampa Bay. She had been pushing her physical training to new levels, preparing for the possibility of SEAL selection. Her runs had grown longer, her workouts more intense, her dedication more complete. As she ran through the darkness, her mind wandered to the life she was potentially giving up. Her college friends were getting married, starting careers, building normal lives. Her brothers called less frequently, confused by her obsessive focus on military advancement. Even her relationship with her parents had grown strained, as they struggled to understand why their daughter couldn't be satisfied with a stable Navy career. She stopped running and stood at the water's edge, watching the sun rise over Tampa Bay. In the growing light, she could see the future she was choosing: years of training, deployment cycles that would test every relationship, physical and psychological demands that would reshape her into something her younger self wouldn't recognize. But she could also see the alternative: a safe career in intelligence, eventual promotion to senior enlisted or commissioned officer ranks, retirement with full benefits, and the respect of her peers. A normal life with normal challenges and normal rewards. Standing there in the dawnlight, Sarah Martinez made the decision that would define the rest of her life. She would pursue the SEALs not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Not because she wanted to prove something to others, but because she couldn't live with herself if she didn't try. The warnings had been given. The choice was made. Now the real work would begin. #breaking barriers. The call came on a Tuesday morning in December 2013. Sarah Martinez was reviewing intelligence reports in her cubicle at SOCOM headquarters when her supervisor, Lieutenant Commander Walsh, approached with an expression she couldn't read. "Martinez, I need to see you in my office. Now." Sarah followed Walsh down the hallway, her mind racing through possible reasons for the summons. Had she made an error in her latest intelligence assessment? Was she being reassigned? Or worse, was her security clearance under review? Walsh closed the office door and gestured for Sarah to sit. On the desk lay an official-looking document with the Department of Defense seal at the top. "Sarah, what I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room until the official announcement." "Yes, ma'am." Walsh slid the document across the desk. "Secretary of Defense Panetta has just rescinded the combat exclusion policy. Women will now be eligible for combat roles, including special operations." Sarah's hands trembled as she read the official memo. After years of training, hoping, and preparing for a change that seemed impossible, the barrier had finally fallen. "Ma'am, does this mean?" "It means the SEALs have 18 months to develop integration plans." "It means you need to be ready." The next 18 months passed in a blur of preparation unlike anything Sarah had experienced. The official policy change created a firestorm of debate throughout the military and in Congress. Some argued that women would compromise unit effectiveness. Others maintained that the best qualified candidates, regardless of gender, deserved the opportunity to serve. Sarah ignored the debate and focused on preparation. Master Chief Reynolds had introduced her to a retired SEAL named Danny Quinn, who ran an unofficial preparatory program for SEAL candidates. Quinn's program was legendary within special operations circles for its brutal physical requirements and uncompromising standards. "Martinez," Quinn said during their first meeting, "I don't care what's between your legs. I care what's between your ears." The teams don't need diversity for the sake of diversity. They need killers. Quinn's facility, located in a converted warehouse outside Tampa, looked more like a medieval torture chamber than a modern fitness center. Concrete floors, exposed beams, and equipment that seemed designed to inflict maximum suffering on trainees. The other candidates in Quinn's program were all male, all veterans, all preparing for SEAL selection. They ranged from fresh-faced Marines just out of their first enlistment to grizzled special operations veterans looking to transfer into the SEALs. Sarah was the anomaly, and the scrutiny was intense. "Don't expect special treatment," Quinn announced on her first day. "The ocean doesn't care about your gender. Bullets don't care about your gender. And neither do I." The training regime was devastating. 4-hour sessions that combined cardiovascular endurance, strength training, water confidence, and mental resilience exercises. Sarah often left the facility barely able to walk, her body pushed beyond what she thought possible. But she adapted. Her cardiovascular fitness, already exceptional from years of dedicated running, allowed her to maintain pace during the endless conditioning drills. Her analytical mind helped her master the technical skills required for underwater navigation and small unit tactics. Most importantly, she earned the respect of her fellow candidates through simple persistence. When others quit during particularly brutal training sessions, Sarah continued. When instructors screamed abuse designed to break mental resolve, she remained focused on the task. "Martinez doesn't quit," became a common observation among the other candidates. No matter what Quinn throws at her, she just keeps going. 3 months into the program, Sarah faced her first major test. Quinn announced that the session would focus on water confidence, always the most challenging aspect of SEAL preparation. Candidates would be required to perform increasingly complex tasks while holding their breath underwater. The evolution began simply enough: swim 50 meters underwater while maintaining perfect form. Sarah completed it easily, her technique refined through months of pool training. The tasks grew progressively more difficult: retrieve objects from the bottom of a 12-foot pool while weighted down with gear. Navigate an underwater obstacle course in complete darkness. Perform equipment maintenance while submerged. The final task pushed candidates to their absolute limits. They would be bound hand and foot, thrown into the pool, and required to swim to the bottom, untie themselves, and surface. It was a simulation of the kind of situation SEALs might face if captured and thrown into water. Sarah watched as several candidates attempted the evolution. 2 succeeded immediately. 3 others required multiple attempts before succeeding. 2 quit rather than continue trying. When her turn came, Sarah felt the familiar calm that descended during high-stress situations. As the instructors bound her hands and feet with rope, she focused on her breathing, storing as much oxygen as possible before the plunge. The water was shockingly cold, designed to add another layer of stress to an already challenging task. Sarah sank quickly, the weights attached to her gear pulling her toward the bottom of the 12-foot pool. The rope around her wrists was tight, cutting off circulation and making her hands tingle. At the bottom, she began working on the knots, using techniques Quinn had taught the class. The key was remaining calm while carbon dioxide built up in her blood, fighting the body's natural urge to panic and surface for air. The first knot came loose after what felt like an eternity. Her lungs were beginning to burn, but she forced herself to focus on the second knot. This one was tighter, made more difficult by the swelling in her hands from restricted circulation. Sarah felt the familiar signs of oxygen deprivation, tunnel vision, lightheadedness, the overwhelming urge to breathe. But she had experienced these sensations dozens of times during training, had learned to work through them rather than surrender to panic. The second knot finally released, freeing her hands. She quickly untied her feet and kicked toward the surface, her vision narrowing to a small circle of light above. She broke the surface gasping, immediately followed by the distinctive taste of blood from oxygen-starved lungs. Quinn nodded approvingly. Time, 2 minutes, 40 seconds. Well within standards. But the real test came afterward, when the other candidates approached her during the break. "Martinez," said Jake Rodriguez, a former Marine recon operator. "That was solid work down there." "Thanks. Question is, can you do it when someone's shooting at you?" It was the question that haunted every SEAL candidate, the unknown variable that could only be answered in combat. All the pool training in the world couldn't truly prepare someone for the chaos and terror of an actual firefight. "Guess we'll find out," Sarah replied. Rodriguez grinned. "Good answer." As the 18-month preparation period neared its end, Sarah received new orders. She would report to Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California, for basic underwater demolition/SEAL training. The official policy change had been implemented, and she would be in the first class to include female candidates. The night before she left Tampa, Master Chief Reynolds took her to dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the bay. It was the first time she had seen him in civilian clothes, and he looked older, more tired than she remembered. "Sarah, what I'm about to say stays between us." "Of course, Master Chief." Reynolds stared out at the water for a long moment. "I've been in the teams for 25 years. I've seen good men broken by training that wasn't half as hard as what you're about to face. I've seen excellent operators wash out of BUD/S because they couldn't handle the psychological pressure." He turned to look at her directly. "The physical standards haven't changed. The mental standards haven't changed. But the scrutiny you're going to face will be unlike anything those other candidates experience. Every mistake will be magnified. Every success will be questioned. You're not just trying to become a SEAL. You're trying to prove that women belong in the teams." "I understand, Master Chief." "Do you? Because if you fail, it won't just be your failure. It'll be used as evidence that women can't hack it. It'll make it harder for the next woman, and the one after that. The weight of his words settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. She had always understood that her performance would be scrutinized, but she hadn't fully grasped the historical significance of her attempt. "Master Chief, what if I'm not good enough?" Reynolds smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "Sarah, I've watched you for 4 years. I've seen you push through things that would break most people. You're ready. The question is whether they're ready for you." Sarah arrived at Naval Special Warfare Center on a Monday morning in June. Coronado Beach stretched out before her, the Pacific Ocean shimmering in the early morning light. Somewhere in that water, she would either prove herself worthy of the SEAL Trident or join the ranks of those who had tried and failed. Bud/S Class 315 consisted of 147 candidates from all branches of the military. Sarah was one of 3 women in the class, making them historical footnotes regardless of their ultimate success or failure. The other 2 women were Army Special Forces veterans who had transferred to the Navy specifically for the opportunity to attempt SEAL selection. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen was the class officer, a former surface warfare officer who had completed a lateral transfer into special warfare. At 32, she was older than most candidates but brought a decade of naval experience to the training. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos was a former Army Special Forces medic with 2 combat deployments in Afghanistan. At 28, she possessed extensive special operations experience and a reputation for competence under pressure. The 3 women gravitated toward each other during the initial administrative phase, understanding that they shared a unique burden. They would support each other when possible, but ultimately each would succeed or fail based on individual performance. "Ladies," said Instructor Chief Petty Officer Mark Sullivan during their first meeting, "let me be clear about something. You're here because policy changed, not because standards changed. You'll be held to the same requirements as every other candidate. No more, no less." Sullivan was a 20-year SEAL veteran with multiple combat deployments and a reputation for fairness coupled with uncompromising standards. His presence as senior instructor was seen as a signal that the command was serious about maintaining training integrity regardless of political pressures. "There are people inside and outside this command who want you to fail," Sullivan continued. "There are also people who want you to succeed. I don't give a damn about either group. I care about one thing, whether you can do the job." The first phase of BUD/S focused on physical conditioning, designed to eliminate candidates who lacked the basic fitness requirements for special operations. Sarah had prepared extensively for this phase, but the reality exceeded her expectations. Days began at 0500 with calisthenics, hundreds of push-ups, sit-ups, and jumping jacks performed in the soft sand of Coronado Beach. Physical training sessions lasted 4 hours, followed by academic classes on subjects ranging from diving physics to small unit tactics. The instructors were relentless, constantly pushing candidates to their breaking point and beyond. They screamed insults designed to provoke emotional reactions, assign impossible tasks with insufficient time for completion, and maintained constant pressure through sleep deprivation and physical exhaustion. Martinez. Instructor Petty Officer Thompson shouted during a particularly brutal conditioning session. "Your push-ups look like garbage. Drop and give me 50 more." Sarah complied without comment, focusing on maintaining proper form while her arms screamed in protest. Around her, other candidates were beginning to show signs of breaking. Some muttered complaints under their breath. Others showed visible frustration at the seemingly arbitrary punishments. But Sarah had learned during her years of preparation that emotion was the enemy during training. Instructors looked for excuses to eliminate candidates, and emotional reactions provided those excuses. She performed every task with the same mechanical precision, never arguing, never complaining, never showing weakness. The strategy proved effective. By the end of the first week, 12 candidates had rung the bell, officially withdrawing from training. Sarah remained, along with Chen and Santos, all 3 women demonstrating the consistency that instructors valued above flashy individual performances. But the real test came during the second week, when the class faced their first major evaluation, the 4-mile timed run. Candidates were required to complete the distance in 32 minutes or less while wearing boots and fatigues. Failure meant immediate dismissal from training. Sarah had run the distance hundreds of times during preparation, usually finishing well under the time limit. But training conditions were different from the stress and fatigue of BUD/S. Candidates were operating on minimal sleep, their bodies already depleted from a week of intensive physical training. The run began at 0600, as the sun rose over Coronado Beach. Sarah settled into a comfortable pace, resisting the urge to sprint ahead of the group. Marathon runners had taught her that consistency trumped speed in distance events, and she intended to finish strong rather than flame out early. By the 2-mile mark, the class had strung out considerably. The fastest runners had pulled ahead, while slower candidates struggled to maintain the required pace. Sarah found herself in the middle of the pack, exactly where she wanted to be for the halfway point. The 3rd mile was where the race really began. Candidates who had started too fast began to fade, their pace dropping as accumulated fatigue took its toll. Sarah maintained her rhythm, gradually moving up through the field as others faltered. With half a mile to go, Sarah was in the top 20 candidates. Her breathing was labored but controlled, her legs tired but functional. Around her, she could hear the sounds of other candidates beginning to struggle, ragged breathing, feet slapping heavily on the pavement, the occasional grunt of pain from overtaxed muscles. The finish line came into view with 300 meters remaining. Sarah could see the digital clock displaying elapsed time, 28:45 and counting. She was well within the time limit, but she had learned that exceeding minimum standards was always preferable to barely meeting them. She kicked into her final sprint, drawing on reserves she had built during months of preparation. Her legs felt like concrete, but her pace increased as she passed several more candidates in the final stretch. Sarah crossed the finish line with a time of 29:12, good for 15th place overall. More importantly, she had completed the evolution without showing distress, maintaining her composure even as other candidates collapsed or vomited from the exertion. Martinez. Instructor Sullivan called out as she walked through the cool-down area. Good run. Keep it up. It was the first positive comment she had received from an instructor, and it meant more than any medal or commendation she had ever earned. She was beginning to prove herself worthy of consideration, one evolution at a time. But her success was not without consequences. Some of her male classmates began to view her performance with suspicion, wondering if instructors were giving her easier tasks or grading her more leniently. The questions weren't voiced directly, but Sarah could sense the doubt in their conversations and interactions. The tension came to a head during the 3rd week, when candidates were required to perform buddy carries across the beach. The evolution tested both individual strength and teamwork, as candidates were paired randomly and required to carry each other for predetermined distances. Sarah was paired with Petty Officer 2nd Class Mike Bradford, a former college football player who outweighed her by 80 pounds. Bradford made no secret of his belief that women had no place in the SEALs, and being paired with Sarah only reinforced his resentment. "This is bullshit," Bradford muttered as they prepared for the evolution. "How am I supposed to carry someone who can't carry me back?" Sarah looked Bradford in the eye, her expression calm despite the insult. "Guess we'll find out." The first leg of the evolution required Bradford to carry Sarah 200 meters across the soft sand. He completed it easily, his football background providing the strength necessary for the task. But his pace was deliberately slow, and he made sure to grunt and complain loudly enough for other candidates to hear. "This is exactly why women don't belong here," he announced to no one in particular as he dropped Sarah at the halfway point. Dead weight. Now it was Sarah's turn to carry Bradford. The task seemed impossible. She weighed 140 pounds, while Bradford was a solid 220. Basic physics suggested that she simply didn't have the leverage necessary to lift him, much less carry him 200 meters across unstable sand. But Sarah had prepared for this moment. She had spent months working with Quinn and other trainers, learning techniques for moving heavier casualties. The key wasn't raw strength, it was leverage, technique, and mental determination. She positioned herself behind Bradford, gripping his gear harness with both hands. Using her legs rather than her back, she lifted him into a modified fireman's carry that distributed his weight across her shoulders and torso. The first few steps were agony. Bradford's weight seemed to increase with every stride, and the soft sand made each step a struggle. But Sarah had endured worse during training, had pushed through barriers that once seemed insurmountable. She focused on her breathing, maintaining a steady rhythm as she worked her way across the beach. Around her, she could hear other candidates performing their own carries, but she blocked out everything except the task at hand. 50 meters. Her legs were beginning to shake from the strain, but she maintained her pace. Bradford, to his credit, remained motionless, not adding to the difficulty through unnecessary movement. 100 meters. Sarah was halfway to the finish line, but her body was approaching its limits. The weight on her shoulders felt crushing, and she could taste blood from the exertion. But quitting was not an option. 150 meters. Sarah's vision began to tunnel, a sign of approaching exhaustion. But she could see the finish line ahead, marked by a group of instructors with stopwatches. With 20 meters to go, Sarah's legs finally began to give out. She stumbled, nearly dropping Bradford as her balance wavered. For a moment, it looked like she would fail the evolution, proving Bradford's point about women being dead weight. But she recovered, adjusting her grip and finding a final reserve of strength. The last 20 meters took an eternity, each step requiring conscious effort as her body fought against the overwhelming fatigue. Sarah crossed the finish line and gently lowered Bradford to the sand, her entire body shaking from the exertion. She had completed the carry in the required time, proving that technique and determination could overcome physical disadvantages. Bradford stood up slowly, brushing sand from his uniform. He looked at Sarah with an expression she couldn't read, his earlier antagonism replaced by something that might have been respect. "Martinez," he said quietly, so only she could hear. That was solid. It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. Sarah had proven herself in the most basic currency of special operations, performance under pressure. The buddy carry evolution marked a turning point in Sarah's Bud/S experience. Word of her performance spread through the class, earning grudging respect from candidates who had previously questioned her presence. She was no longer viewed as a diversity experiment or political statement, but as a legitimate candidate who deserved to be there. But greater challenges lay ahead. First phase was just the beginning, designed to eliminate candidates who lacked basic fitness and mental toughness. The real test would come in second phase, when candidates would face the legendary Hell Week, 5.5 days of continuous training with minimal sleep and maximum stress. Hell Week had broken thousands of candidates over the decades, pushing them beyond the limits of human endurance. It was where dreams died and legends were born, where the SEAL community separated those who merely wanted to be SEALs from those who would do anything to earn the trident. Sarah Martinez had survived the first phase of SEAL training, proving that women could meet the physical and mental standards required for special operations. But Hell Week would test everything she had learned about herself, everything she thought she knew about her limits. The warning bell had been rung. The real battle was about to begin.